Welcome everyone to this STR webinar. Good morning. My name is Isis Lopez and I work for the Austin Code Department in the Community Engagement team. Thank you so much for being here today. I will be facilitating today's webinar, and today's webinar is about Type 1 short-term rental licenses. So welcome. Thank you for taking time out of your day to learn more about STRs, as we like to call them, and you'll be hearing that acronym throughout today. Before we begin, and I overview this for those of you who were early, today's session is being recorded and it will be available for viewing post-webinar for those of you who are in attendance, and also for those who registered but couldn't quite make it, or perhaps came in a bit late. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please use the chat feature in the Zoom webinar. This information session will be about an hour, and if we have time in the end, we will answer those questions, but we will hold most of the questions until the end of the session. And one of our teammates will then read those questions out loud for those presenters to answer as time permits. And for those of you who submitted questions beforehand, we will take those questions into consideration as well. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. It's 11:01. There are many different types of short-term rental licenses in Austin, and there's different application processes for each one. This webinar will educate participants about the Type 1 owner-occupied short-term rental license. This webinar will answer those questions related to the license, the ordinance, and the application process for Type 1. We have a few subject matter experts in the room today, and I just want to take a moment to introduce them. So we have Mr. Daniel Armstrong. He's on camera. He's the division manager over the licensing team. We have Lisa DeRoche, who's an administrative manager over the STR licensing team. And then we have our subject matter expert and your presenter for today, Viola Ruiz. She's the program coordinator over the STR licensing team. So with that, I will go ahead and get started and turn it over to Ms. Viola Ruiz for information on how to apply and to know more about STR licensing. So Viola.
Great, thank you. So first of all, hello everyone. We're so glad to see you. We at Austin Code want to welcome you today to our first STR presentation. There will be several upcoming webinars on short-term rentals this year. However, the one today is geared specifically to Type 1 licenses for both license holders and their managing partners. We will also be highlighting the how-tos of submitting an application and the documents needed to support application and renewals. Slide. So first things first, why do I need a license? We have heard this question asked many different times. Why do I need a license? In 2012, the Austin City Council passed the first STR ordinance, and since then, there have been a few amendments to the ordinance. The first amendment to the STR ordinance was passed to also allow the rental of one room, identified as a Type 1A. The rental of a second unit on the same lot as the primary home, such as a guest house, is identified as a Type 1 secondary. And the rentals of multifamily units are identified as Type 3s. The final amendment, and which is the one that we follow today, was amended in 2016. That amendment issued a moratorium for Type 2 residential licenses beyond 2022 and created a new type of license, the Type 2 commercial. Some people ask us quite often, didn't the Third Court of Appeals allow the licensing of Type 2s? Well, yes and no. The Third Court of Appeals overturned the moratorium to allow Type 2 residential licenses to be renewed beyond 2022, as long as it is renewed before the expiration date. And the current ordinance can be found on our website at the very top of our webpage. So what is a short-term rental? STRs, or vacation rentals, as they are sometimes called, have become known as Airbnbs. STR properties are legal dwelling units that can be used as rentals for less than 30 consecutive days and must be licensed. What they are not is Airstreamers, travel trailers, tiny houses. You get the idea. So how do I license my STR? And what license should I look for? Okay, so let's start with a couple of questions. Of the different types of STR licenses, which one do I apply for? So we generally will ask applicants to review the website for the most applicable STR description. I've placed photos in each of the different types to give you an idea of how they look like and a few questions to ask yourself. The general description for each of these properties are as follows. Type 1 is owner occupied and is the homeowner's primary residence. Type 1A, the rental of a room within the primary residence with access to a bathroom. Type 1 secondary. This is a secondary dwelling unit located on the same property as the primary residence, such as a guest house. Additional STR types. So even though this webinar is specifically aimed at type 1s, I did want to mention the additional type of STRs. So I've included a few more visuals on the other types of licenses for a definition for a type 2 commercial license and a type 3 and what they can look like. Another good way to tell what license your property qualifies for is to look at how the property is used. More questions to ask yourself. Do I live in my house? Who is the owner of the property I live in? Are there other units in the building where I live at? These questions will give you a clearer indication of the type of license that is applicable to your STR. Okay, so now you've determined that you want to rent your property as a short-term rental. So how do you apply? There are a couple of different ways that we have applications. One is online. Our office has a partnership with the City of Austin Controller's Office to allow our customers to submit their application, supporting documents and renewals online. In addition, you are also able to pay your City of Austin hotel occupancy taxes using just one customer number. Or you can mail in your signed application along with supporting documents to our office, and the PO box is listed above. Some prefer to come in person and submit their applications to our intake office. This interaction helps people who still have questions about their short-term rental. And so you can meet with someone and discuss your particular short-term rental. Our office is located on East Bend White and the address is listed above. We do ask that if you come into our office, that you first schedule an appointment by calling the number listed on the slide. In addition to the application, the following documents are required to support your application. Now, without these, we cannot issue a license. If you do not have a certificate of occupancy, you can call 311 and ask for development services. We can also provide an email address where you can send in your requests. They can usually email your certificate of occupancy if they have one on file at no additional cost. However, if they do not have it on file, you may have to have a life safety inspection to obtain it. If a building inspector has to come out and inspect the property, there could be a cost involved. And so you may want to confirm this before an inspector comes out and views your property. Proof of insurance. A separate rental policy is not required. However, it is best to check with your particular insurance. Some insurance agencies do require a separate policy and some do not. Registration with the controller's office. A customer number will be assigned to you when you register with the controller's office. This customer number will be the one required to pay your City of Austin hotel occupancy taxes. One of the things that we hear quite often is that Airbnb pays the taxes. And they do pay the taxes for the state, but not for the city of Austin. So we do ask you to ensure that when they say they pay the taxes, that they are talking about both taxes that are required. This fee is paid, and the fee for the application. This fee is paid to offset the review of the application and is non-refundable. So this is another question we get quite often. The review process, how long does it take? Well, it depends. STR processors will review the application and the supporting documents. Some of the things that we are looking for is the application complete? Do we have all the information that we need? What type of license does the property qualify for? Does the owner information match our records? Do I have all the supporting documents? Are there missing documents? Is there a certificate of occupancy? If the documents are not received, if there are missing documents, someone will reach out to you and request the documents. We do ask that you respond to the request as soon as possible. If the documents aren't received within 10 days of notification, the application may be canceled without a refund, and the applicant will need to start the process all over again. Partial documents and applications cause delays. Please do not submit partial application. Okay, now that you have collected everything, you're on the road to success. You have determined the type of license you need, have gathered all your supporting documents, and have determined that you are submitting, how you are submitting your application. You are well on the road to success. If you don't hear from anyone in our office, that is a good thing. That means we have received all the required documents. There are no other obstacles to licensing your STR. If a processor contacts you for missing information, again, or an issue was found with the property, please provide the requested information as soon as possible. Renewal. So this is the easy part. This part is easy. An email reminder is automatically sent to all license holders and is automatic. The first one goes out 45 days prior to the expiration. The second one goes out 30 days prior to expiration. And the last one notifies you that the license has expired. Your renewal should be received before it expires. If it is received afterwards, you will need to submit a new application. The exception is for a type 2 residential license, which we can no longer issue based on the moratorium. So fees, taxes, and fines. Oh, I know this one's everyone's favorite. So about the fees. The application fee is now $643. The technology fee is a new fee that has been accessed this year to offset the technology used for STRs. Taxes. The city of Austin collects 11% for hotel occupancy taxes, and the state collects 6% for hotel occupancy taxes. I just want to reiterate that one of the things that we hear a lot is Airbnb pays for my taxes. Please be aware, they do not collect the city of Austin hotel occupancy taxes. They only collect the state hot taxes of 6%. At the time of renewal, our office does review the payment history of these taxes. So previously, I mentioned the fees associated with STRs. This slide will give you an idea of how enforcement works. Our office reacts when notified of any STR misconduct. We do not go out looking for violations. Thus, if someone does not voice their complaints to 311, we have no way of knowing there are issues with an STR, and we will not act to enforce any alleged violations. The ones that are most common are when code officers will respond to 311 calls. And that's kind of the order of how we proceed in enforcement. Once the complaint is received, Austin Code responds within 24 hours to inspect the violation and the complaint. If the complaint is deemed valid, enforcement action takes place. And that is it for our presentation. We do ask that we work together to make our communities safer. We do ask if you have any questions about licensing, or you know someone who has questions about licensing, please direct them to us, and we are happy to work with them to license their property. Thank you very much for being here, and look forward to hearing from you. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you, Viola. We do have some questions, and I do want to ask the subject matter experts if they do want to answer those questions. We do have time for it.
Okay.
So we'll go ahead and get started with some of them. Michael, if you want to go ahead and read some of the first ones, you can go ahead and do so.
Sure. To the subject matter experts, would you like to start off with the ones that we've quickly received in the chat, or the ones we received in advance?
Let's start with the ones that we received in advance, and then we can go to the ones that we received in the chat, I think.
Excellent. So one of the ones that we received in advance was, how can we find out if a house has gone through the correct process of a short-term rental?
Okay, so I understand that to mean, how do they know if that house has a license?
Yeah, that's what I understood as well. So, for
Okay.
example, if I was the one that saw it, how would I go about finding that out?
Yeah, so we do have an online system where you can check it with a certain address if they have an STR license. So we do have that available on our website.
Can I
Excellent.
jump in on that just very quickly?
Go ahead, Lisa.
That website is actually the ABC portal through the Development Services website on the city website. And you can search by address. And the folder type you would want to look for is called an OL. And those are all options on that search page. So you'll want to put in the street address and the OL, and it should return any operating licenses for that address, that specific address. You can also, if you want a list of all licensed short-term rentals in the city of Austin, you can submit a public information request by emailing public.information@austintexas.gov, and a list will be provided to you within 10 business days.
I went ahead and put that email here in the chat for everyone, but Lisa or Viola, if you can put the link where we can find that folder for OL, that would be great.
Okay, sure.
I added it.
Oh, thank you. Look at that. Perfect.
Oh, do you have it? All right.
Yeah, we've already put it.
Okay.
The second question we received in advance was just in regards to a recording being available afterwards. ECs, I believe we're going to be sending that out afterwards, correct?
Correct.
Excellent. The third one was, what is the status of the return of non-owner occupied type 2 permits? And that kind of speaks to one that we received in the chat earlier.
Okay, I believe what they're asking is, what is the status of the type 2 residential licenses that were issued previously?
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, the amended ordinance does not allow us to issue any more type 2 residential licenses. However, there was a type 2 commercial license that was created in the last amendment. And so if a property is located in a commercial area, in a commercial zone, we can license it as a non-owner occupied type 2 commercial license. Lisa,
As long as certain conditions are met.
that. Go ahead.
Excellent.
Lisa.
I apologize. I just want to reiterate what Viola was saying, that we can issue new non-owner occupied and commercially zoned areas, but there are some very stringent requirements related to that. That information can be found on our website. but it cannot be within 1,000 feet of another type 2 licensed property. So that is something, if you're curious about a specific address, you can email us and we will try to give you some guidance on whether or not that property may or may not qualify. We can't do an entire analysis, but we can certainly give you some additional information that would help make that decision as to whether or not you should apply.
Thank you. So the last one that we received in advance, and then I'll move on to ones that we received today here within the presentation, was they were looking for a clearer understanding of type 3 permits and the restrictions for multi-unit properties.
You want to go ahead, Lisa?
Sure. Much like type 2s, type 3s are separated between residentially zoned areas and commercially zoned areas. Multifamily is defined as a triplex or above. So it has to have 3 units to be considered multifamily. And if it's in a residentially zoned area, then there's a 3% limit capped on licenses available both in each individual building and the complex as a whole. So for example, if you have a multifamily property that has 100 units and it's in a residentially zoned area, there can only be 3 short-term rental units in that complex, or, well, we're gonna have to say, and 10 buildings. So we've got 10 buildings with 10 units each. Each building could have up to 3, and the whole building could have up to 30. Sorry, I was trying to do math in my head for a moment there, and it didn't work out. So each building would be capped at 3, and each complex would be capped at 3%. Sorry, 3% of the total units. Commercial, that cap is 25%. So there's a lot more cap space in multifamily properties that are located in commercially zoned areas. So if you're looking around for perhaps an apartment complex that might have some cap space available, you can also email us that address and we can take a quick peek at it and see, as long as you let us know how many total units there are in each building and within the complex, we can check to see if there's cap space available at that time. So type 3s are a little bit more complicated because there are zoning regulations that dictate the number of available licenses. But again, our staff is available. We're always happy to help. We just ask that you give us a few days. As you can imagine, we get quite a few inquiries, and particularly if it's a larger apartment complex, it could take quite a bit of research to determine all of the active licenses and decide and figure out whether or not there may be some cap space available. But that's the big thing with the multifamily properties is 3% residential, 25% commercial.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. We're going to move on to the questions that we've received today during the presentation. But before I do that, I just want to make a quick note of some that we've already addressed, either in some of the previous questions or within the presentation itself. Katie had asked, will the slide presentation be downloadable at conclusion? And EC's had already answered in the chat that yes, we will send a copy of the recording and a presentation afterward. And Mark had asked if existing type 2 licenses will continue to be renewed, but no new licenses will be issued. And you've addressed that one here within the past few questions.
Right.
And then I'll go now in sort of order of appearance of these questions. Francis asked, does multifamily include ownership condos and rental apartments?
Yes. Anything that is multifamily would be, as Lisa said, anything that's 3 units or above would be considered multifamily units.
Awesome. And Brianna was asked a 2-part question. You mentioned no Airstreams and et cetera, things of that nature, but she does see them on Airbnb. Can those be legally rented out?
Those do not have a legal STR license, therefore they are renting out illegally.
Thank you. And the second part of her question was, when does type 2 moratorium end and what will change when it does? Is there a limit to the number of type 2s in a certain area?
So that's a little bit more complicated, and that's the reason that we ask people to call us before they submit an application, because the cost is non-refundable. So the type 2 residential licenses are part of the moratorium that we cannot issue any more licenses based on the location that they are in for residential type 2s. However, they also created the type 2 commercial license. So if property is located in a mixed use in a commercial services area, then we can license in that zone. However, there is a cap as to how many we can license as well. And we cannot license any STRs that are within 1,000 feet of another STR that is active. So that is our cap requirement. And basically we call it a, that is a distance requirement based on the ordinance. I hope that answers the question, but they can always email us and we can give them more information.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brandon, for that question. We've got a few more like trickling in now as we're going along with some of these questions, but the next one is, how can we ensure emails sent out about renewal notices or incomplete renewals are received by the correct person?
Well, we ask people at the time of application to make sure that they give us a workable email. A lot of times what will happen, and we see this happen quite often, is that someone will submit an application with an email that they do not regularly use. And so this will stop any automatic emails going directly to them. There's two methods of receipt for these emails, and they are, we send them to the owner and to the contact person. Sometimes we'll have people submit an application without an email address. So if we're not able to obtain the email address for the owner, then the email will go to the contact person, but not the owner. And if the contact person is no longer the contact person, then that email is going out to the contact person, not the owner, because they never gave us the email or they didn't give us a correct email. So we see this quite often. And so at the time of application, we ask people over and over again, please make sure you give us an email that works, that we can contact you in case we need to for whatever reason. So that's how you can ensure. You need to make sure that when you give us an email address, it's the email address that you look at, that you respond to, that kind of thing.
Yeah, there was sort of a second part of that question, an elaboration that as a property manager, we are constantly working to integrate other STR units to our portfolio, and sometimes the accounts have the old PM email or the owner's email on file. And how do they ensure that all accounts are current and correct on the address on file, and can it be updated through the finance portal?
It can be updated through the finance portal for your hot taxes, and that is for your hotel occupancy taxes. However, our system does not automatically upload whatever you upload to the finance website. So if you change your phone number on there, your address, or your customer code number, then that's not something that is going to be changed on our end. So they're two separate entities. Although we work together, our systems are not integrated with those numbers. So we do ask that if you change your contact person, you change your address, phone number, email, any of that information, for you to contact our office as well and let us know that. So we can go into our system and change the way we contact you.
You know, I'd like to add on to that just a little bit. We have found with our, we do have quite a few operators that have multiple licenses that they manage. We always recommend for those companies to create sort of an internal resource account that multiple staff members would have access to, so that you have a more generalized email that rather than the email of an individual employee on file with us, to ensure that those notices reach somebody in your company for those renewal reminders. Because even if you don't receive those reminders, it is the license holder's responsibility to ensure that they renew their licenses on time. So we have the system that sends out those emails automatically. We don't monitor them. We don't really know if they get bounced back at all. It's an automated system. So if your email address is changed, we're not going to have any way of knowing about it. So that's why we always say, if you've got multiple STRs, it's usually best to have a resource account that multiple people can check to make sure that you're getting all of your notices.
Awesome, thank you. If the next question is, if the Airbnb is creating noise and trash and other neighborhood disturbances, how are those complaints that are not, in parentheses or in quotes, code addressed?
Okay, so I understand what they're asking is that if the STR in question has these type of disturbances, how is it being addressed by enforcement?
Right, and maybe if it's not necessarily under code.
Yeah, so Dan, I'm going to defer this question to you.
Michael, repeat the question. I don't think I'm clear on it.
Yeah, of course. The question was, if an Airbnb is creating noise and trash and other neighborhood disturbances, how are those complaints that are not code addressed?
How are the complaints that are not code? Well, that's the part that I'm not sure I'm clear on. So
I think what I got out of it, Dan, is if there's anything, is there anything related to a neighborhood disturbance like that that doesn't fall under Austin code? And if so, how are those addressed?
Okay, that's going to be a long response. So everybody strap in. Let's begin with the process. Okay, you live next door to an unlicensed short-term rental. They're leasing for less than 30 days. Let's just say every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. You know you're going to have a tough weekend when you see a carload of individuals pull up. You know there's going to be parties and what have you. You call 311, make a complaint about the unlicensed short-term rental because you're smart. You've already checked the database, the ABC portal that Lisa and Mr. Roche mentioned earlier, and you know that this is not a short-term rental property. It's not a licensed short-term rental. You call 311, you make the complaint, the STR complaint, you know, loud noise, unlicensed short-term rental. There will be inspectors respond within 24 hours. Now, we work on a code enforcement tiered response matrix, and the requirement for response is 24 hours to a short-term rental complaint. We realize that once you make the complaint, you don't want to wait 24 hours. You kind of like to go to sleep at night. So when our inspectors are on duty, they are out until 11 p.m. Typically 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. On Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, and then the rest of the week, 7 a.m. Until 7 a.m. till 11 p.m. So our inspectors are aware that people need to sleep at night, so they will respond as soon as they can after they see the call come up in their queue. Once they arrive on scene, they're going to attempt to make contact with the individuals. If they do validate that this is an unlicensed short-term rental, they're going to send a notice of violation. They're required to send one notice of violation per year to a property for a specific violation. So if this violation is operating an unlicensed short-term rental, that notice of violation will be sent. There will be follow-up inspections. Once outside of the compliance timeframe, if these individuals are caught operating again without a license, then there will be a citation posted to the property that the property owner will be accountable for. So there's that. The next most common violation we see is advertising an unlicensed short-term rental. For that, we have inspectors that conduct research. They look at the advertising platforms. They will find an advertisement, research to get that location. There are advertising platforms typically will not put the address of the short-term rental in there. Our inspectors know ways around that. And so they will check it against our database, and if they find, okay, this is not a licensed short-term rental, then we will again follow up with one notice violation. If that advertisement is not pulled within the compliance timeframe, then and the advertisement's still there, again, the property will be posted with a citation. We have a case escalation matrix. I know that wasn't part of the question. I don't want to monopolize all the time. But we will escalate from administrative hearing, which is a quasi judicial setting, still the power of law to find property owners. We'll escalate to municipal court. In extreme cases, we'll work in concert with Austin Law Department to escalate a case to district court for injunctive relief. That has happened. It's happened recently. In fact, most recently, we suspended an actual property that was a licensed short-term rental for repeat violations of noise and basically degradation of the quality of life for nearby neighbors and just the quality of the neighborhood. So it's not unheard of to suspend a licensed property. For those offenses that are outside of Austin Code Department's jurisdiction, such as noise. Now, we can post a citation for noise, but again, that's going to hold the property owner accountable. That is not going to help the neighbors then and there. We can ask tenants, can you please keep the noise down, be cognizant it's late at night, neighbors are trying to sleep, and they can simply tell us they don't care, slam the door. And with respect to the authority of code enforcement, that's the extent of it. We can post a citation holding the property owner accountable. That's not going to help anybody who's calling in that night. So that is a matter for the police. There are ways to file charges through Austin Municipal Court online, but if it were me living next door to a short-term rental and I was being awakened at 3 a.m. With loud noise, I'm going to call the police and make them aware of it. And I hope that answered the question. If not, I'll certainly be happy to follow up.
I did. Thank you so much, Dan. We have a few more questions and we're almost at a 20-minute mark left for the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and try to power through some of these. One of them does have a bit of context to it. The question reads, my assumption is that the city of Austin is not pursuing unlicensed full-time STRs. Is this correct or incorrect? I am a realtor and see tons of full-time STRs in the inner city where I know the licenses have been long ago unavailable. If I had to guess, I would say that 80% of full-time STRs are not licensed.
Anytime you suspect somebody is operating a short-term rental without a license, we ask that you please call 311 so that we can investigate it. Nobody should be operating without a license. It's only fair if everybody plays by the same rules. There may be some challenges related to individual addresses in terms of gaining access, but we've been doing this for a while. So please just let us know where those are and we will conduct a thorough investigation. If you suspect somebody has a license but don't meet the requirements for the license that they hold, also please let us know about that, because we can institute a secondary investigation of the license requirements at any time to double check and make sure nothing has changed since we initially issued the license. So we ask that please let us know. I know sometimes it can seem like nothing's happening, but things are indeed happening in the background with enforcement. It just takes these processes to protect everybody's civil rights can sometimes take a little bit of time to go through, but we are very diligent and dedicated to making sure that we administer this ordinance in accordance with the wishes of council.
Got it. Question from Beth that came right when the presentation ended. There was no mention of the need for a property to be a homeowner's homestead to qualify for the type 1 owner occupied permit. or the requirement of a driver's license and voter registration? Are these still the requirements?
I would like to take that one because this is an issue that is kind of in flux a little bit. And hi, Beth. Thanks
ahead,
for coming
Lisa.
today. Appreciate it. Yes, the ordinance requirement for type 1 is that it be owner occupied. If you read the ordinance, you'll see it doesn't mention homesteads, it doesn't mention driver's licenses, it doesn't mention voter registrations or any of that. As a department, when we stood up the program, the challenge was how do we validate owner occupation? And so we came up with these requirements that we were using that were homesteaded property, driver's license and voter registration match, file an affidavit. But what we were finding was we were inadvertently licensing properties that didn't meet that owner occupation requirement. So in an attempt to address that, we have now broadened the records that we look at as it relates to owner occupation. And we're now using every publicly available record that we can find. In addition, we have the services of a search engine that searches multiple sources of public records called LexisNexis. It is a law enforcement related database. And so we can see things on there like car registrations and previous addresses and business partners. So we're tightening up the type 1 requirements to ensure that that owner occupation requirement is being met. So we are not just looking at a couple of things anymore. So honestly, what I'm saying to people is if somebody moves into a house and does all the normal things that people do when they move into a house, we'll be able to tell and we'll know whether or not they're living there. And if we have doubts, if we're not able to validate whether or not somebody lives there, there is a very good chance that that license will be denied. And then the applicant has the option to file an appeal of that denial. And then we go to the Building and Standards Commission, and I tell the commissioners what the city looked at to make that determination. And then the applicant has an opportunity to explain how and why they live there or how and why they meet those ordinance requirements. And then the Building and Standards Commission will make that final determination as to whether or not that property is occupied and meets those license requirements. So thank you for that question, Beth, because that has been a real issue in the past. And we are taking steps to address people being able to obtain licenses that they may not necessarily meet the requirements for. And anytime you suspect that, again, please call 311 and let us know, and we're going to look into it.
Definitely, yeah. Thank you, Lisa. Want to acknowledge really quick, some questions have been answered in the chat by Isis and Viola in regards to anonymity and in regards to cap space. So if you ask those, please turn your attention back to the chat. Another one that we received that hasn't been answered actually goes back to the full-time STR question. So about full-time STRs, isn't that a contradiction in terms? If you are renting a room in your house month to month, as in renting to a housemate, then that isn't an STR, correct?
Correct. If you're renting a room to someone for a year, then that definitely would not be considered a short-term rental. If short-term rentals are defined by renting less than 29 days. So short-term rentals and actually renting to a roommate is different.
Got it. Thank you, Viola.
You're welcome.
Does the city take
Add
into
anything,
consideration?
Lisa? Hold on, Michael. Lisa, do
Sure,
you
go
want to
ahead, go
add
ahead.
anything to that?
Nope.
Okay.
Perfect. The next question was, does the city take into consideration the limitations of any association restrictions during the application process?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah. Does the city take into consideration the limitations of any association restrictions during the application process?
Michael, I think I answered that one in the chat.
Oh, did you? Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
I
but the
missed that.
city does not consider civil agreements like those between property owners and HOAs or other neighborhood associations. because those are civil agreements, private agreements between parties, unrelated to the municipal requirements, which are all that we look at as a municipality. We're not beholden to neighborhood groups. We look just at what the city ordinance requires. And if an HOA, the city could license a property and the HOA tells the property owner, you can't do that, the HOA would have to take that property owner to court themselves, and the city would not have any involvement in that.
Got it. Thank you. There's a couple more questions. One has been slightly addressed, but I'll go ahead and ask it anyway. Echoing questions about proliferation of unlicensed STRs, how can a neighborhood work with the city if things are happening like that?
The best way to do that is if you see a house that is being rented and you believe it's being used as a short-term rental, go online and do not find that their address is listing as having a license, then the best way to do that is to contact 311 and go ahead and submit a complaint on it. Once we have so many complaints, because we do react to customer complaints, then we'll be doing an investigation. And if we find that a house continues to have one complaint after another, it needs to go through 311 so that we can see that it has a history of showing complaints for that property. Dan, did you want to add anything to that as far as unlicensed STRs?
I apologize, repeat the question. I was actually researching, there was a recent Supreme Court ruling, I say recent, it's been about 4 years ago, regarding, it was Texas Supreme Court, regarding HOAs and short-term rentals. But anyway, repeat that question.
It was, how can a neighborhood work with the city if they've got a problem short-term rental in their neighborhood? This question was with Francis Ferguson. And we actually, you can let us know or call 311. And if it is a problem property, there are options available to us that I will let Dan go into.
Well, I mean, certainly, if there's a problem within your neighborhood, we want to know about it. I mean, today we are talking about short-term rentals, which is a very important topic. But there's also several other code violations that Austin Code Department wants to know about. So if you are affected by any zoning condition, structural condition, anything you see, please either utilize the 311 app or call 311. We want to know about it and we want to work with you. Speaking specifically for short-term rentals, we have engaged the community through, and I'm very thankful to Ms. Lopez, who has facilitated this meeting, and her community education and outreach group. They have also assisted us with implementing stakeholder meetings as well. So if you're interested in attending the stakeholder meetings that we have monthly, please provide your email address in the chat, and we will ensure that you receive an invite to attend in the future. That way, here's the thing. For the entire city of Austin, we have 6 inspectors that are assigned to short-term rental inspections. Now, we could certainly use more, but those inspectors in and of themselves do what I believe is a fantastic job at what they do. But here's the thing. Everybody that is on this meeting right now, every City of Austin customer that has tuned in, and every customer that is in the stakeholder meetings, you are the eyes and ears. You know exactly what's happening in your community. I can get on this computer and I can type in, okay, let's look at this street. Let's pull up a complete history. Oh, that's what the neighborhood's concerned about, is this and this. I could be totally wrong because I don't live there. You do. So please become a member of the stakeholder groups and let's work in a concerted effort together. I mean, that multiplies the eyes and ears of Austin Code exponentially. So yes, I certainly encourage you to become involved. Um, I'm a native Austinite. I live in the city of Austin. I have utilized the 311 app several times, and I will continue to do so. So by all means, please let us know. We invite participation. We encourage it.
Definitely. And if you've missed it in the chat, there have been ways posted on how you can reach 311 through the app, online, or by phone. We have one more question that came in from Amy. If we're building an ADU that will be submitted as a type 1 STR, are there standards to meet that are above and beyond city building codes?
Yes, sort of. In the short-term rental ordinance, there is a section called secondary dwelling units. And it has to meet the requirements of those secondary dwelling units. And it has to be, I believe, 10 feet away from the primary structure. It can be covered by a breezeway. It cannot have a shared wall. That definition is actually the reason why we can't license like a side B of a duplex. Like when the owner lives on side A and they'd like to use side B as a short-term rental, because it doesn't meet that code definition of a secondary dwelling unit where it's at least 10 feet to the side or the rear of the principal structure. That's why we're not able to issue a license to the side B of a duplex. So if you are building a whole new ADU, you'll want to make sure it meets that secondary dwelling unit definition of at least 10 feet behind or to the side of the principal structure. It can't be in the front yard, for example. It has to be behind or to the side. And meet the definition of a full dwelling unit, which would include cooking facilities and certain square footage requirements. But those requirements would all be met by code. You will want to make sure when the certificate of occupancy is issued for that. We have seen them where they put limits on the CO, saying things like only for non-paying guests. If that happens, you don't have to worry about that. We can deal with that. But you need to make sure that it is issued a certificate of occupancy for occupancy, that it has the full dwelling unit, full restroom, and an adequate amount of space for sleeping and living.
Awesome. If there's any additional questions for the presenters or the subject matter experts, you can ask them here in the chat still while we still have time, or email them to strlicensing@austintexas.gov. If there are no further questions, then I hand this back to ECs.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you so much for moderating the questions. Appreciate everyone's engagement and asking questions. That's what we're here for. That's what we're here for, answering the questions. That was the goal of this informational session. So we appreciate the time that y'all took to ask these questions. Again, as a reminder, we will be sending the recording. And Dan, I think you had something additional that you wanted to say.
I do, and I'll be real quick. Austin Code Department's Director, Jose Roy, I want to share with everybody, recognizes the importance of short-term rentals, both the concerns that individuals have and how oftentimes short-term rentals are also celebrated, and for good reason. So because this is a very important topic and because it deserves as much attention as possible, there's been a restructuring in the department, and Director Roy has implemented plans to have, right now, short-term rentals is part of the larger license and registration division. That is changing. Short-term rentals is going to be its own division, have its own division manager that is going to report to an assistant director who is more focused on everything that is license and registration combined. So that's going to put a lot of attention from the top down on specifically on short-term rentals. So I wanted to share that with the community. The restructuring of the department is already been publicized, but I don't know that if it's, excuse me, made it to the short-term rental community or not. So I did want to make everybody aware of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. We do have our assistant director who will be overseeing short-term rental listening in on this webinar, Mr. Daniel Word. And we have the division manager who will be overseeing short-term rental, Mr. Matt Noriega, in the interim. So he is also listening in. But again, we thank you all for coming and for taking time out of your day to learn more about short-term rental type 1. And thank you to the presenters. Thank you to Viola for the information that you presented to our community. Thank you for Lisa and to Dan Armstrong for the information. And thank you for coming for us today. We will be continuing to have these webinars on a quarterly basis. So be on the lookout. In our website, we will be posting information. And if you are interested in knowing more and learning on how to become a stakeholder and how to be on our email list, please email codecommunications@austintexas.gov. If there were some questions that you didn't get to ask or that you can think of later, Lisa went ahead and put in the chat for the information for the STR licensing team. You can either email strlicensing@austintexas.gov, and she also provided a phone number, and that is 512-974-9144. They're always available to answer as time permits. And if you have any other questions or want to learn more about the Austin Code Department, our website is austintexas.gov/code. We have information not only about short-term rentals, but about property maintenance codes. We have inspection guides that you can do yourself on how to maintain your property, what to look for, what to watch out for, to do those proactive maintenance to keep your home and your surroundings safe. Again, thank you everyone for joining us today. We look forward to helping you all in the future, and we look forward to having future webinars. Thanks, and have a good rest of your day. Bye.